First time I discovered I needed a variable in Figma, I wanted to hover my mouse over one layer and make a completely different layer appear. And after trying some really terrible ideas, it turned out that variables was the solution that I needed, and we're going to learn how to use variables today. We're also going to learn how to do math, how to make switches in your prototypes that change which variant of a component is shown, that sort of thing, all sorts of things. We're going to use all four types of variables: Boolean, string, number, color, in different examples of prototype behavior, and I hope you learned something. Let's jump in. We are going to build this prototype today. It covers a lot of the different variable usage scenarios. I'm just going to highlight the frame and hit Shift Spacebar to open my preview window, make it a little bit smaller. Let's take a look at the functionality I've built into this prototype. We have a switch that lets us change the variant of the man that's being shown. We have a color selection option, where if I click on these different colors, it will change the fill color of the man. And similar to the world map that we were looking at earlier, I've got a few frames here that cause some other layers to activate at a distance. So we'll talk about how that works. And finally, one of the most interesting parts of working with variables, the ability to do math, such as when you're filling a shopping cart, etc. If I click on these buttons, it adds $5 to the total on the right. If I click on this button, it subtracts $5 from the total on the right, and it will stop at 0 so the number doesn't go negative. So there's a bit of logic buried in there too. We're going to cover all of these scenarios, and we're going to build this from scratch today. Let's start with the action at a distance behavior. I'm going to highlight this frame, Shift Spacebar, just to remind you, where if I hover over these frames, other layers will appear or disappear, depending on where my mouse is. So how do we do this? Well, instead of diving straight into the details, I wanted to do a little tour of how it actually works, sort of at a high level, and then we'll do it for real. So the general shape of the communication is when I hover my mouse over the frame, a variable is set to true or false, depending on where my mouse is. When I'm over the head frame, then the head-on variable is switched to true, and so on. And then certain layers are connected to that variable to decide whether to appear or not. So the communication between the hovering over the frame and the layer appearing is done through a Boolean variable, true or false. So how is that communication done? Let's take a look. Let's start here with no interactions defined, no variables, all the layers are switched on, totally normal starting point. So remember, we're going to need a Boolean variable for each of these three hovers. Well, to get to variables, click on the page background. So nothing selected, you just sort of clicked here and you'll see local variables show up here. If I click on these switches here, I'll get a variable panel. I don't have anything defined, so let's create one. When I hit the create button, it's going to give us a choice. We're going to cover all four of these options, but for now, this is a Boolean because it's just an on-off situation. And what was the name of our Boolean switch? Let's call it head on. What is the initial state of this switch? Well, initially, it won't be visible, so I'm going to keep it on false. Let's create the other two variables while we're here too. I'm going to hit create variable at the bottom, another Boolean. We'll call this hands on, and we'll create another variable, Boolean again, feet on. All of these are currently switched off. Now we'll talk about how to make them switch on. Maybe I can leave this here. Let's see. I'm going to hit the head frame here, and we're adding an interaction. So that's under prototype. We can create an interaction by hovering over this frame and clicking one of these plus symbols, or I can click the plus symbol right over here next to interactions and add it here. I'm just going to click over here on the right. What is the interaction we need? We want to change the variable when the mouse enters it, and then we want to change it when the mouse leaves. So we have mouse enter and mouse leave we can use for that. Let me move these out of the way. Mouse enter, what happens? Well, the action here, instead of navigating or things we're more familiar with, we go down here to set variable. Which variable are we setting? It's giving us a list of the ones we've already defined. I want head on to be true. It makes it very easy. You just click on true, click away, and we're actually done. We're ready for the next interaction. I can just hit plus here. We're going to do mouse leave next. On mouse leave, what should we do? We're going to hit the same variable. So set variable. Which variable? Head on. What value do we want it to be? False. Mouse enter makes it true. Mouse leave makes it false. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to close these variables. We don't really need them right now. Okay, so we'd like these layers to be connected to that head-on Boolean we just made, right? So we go to the appearance panel here, and we are looking for some way to connect it to a variable, and there is just no way visible at all. Figma, you guys have to do something here. You have to right-click on the eyeball. There's no indication this is going to do anything, but you right-click on the eyeball, and you'll get this menu pop up, and you say, please connect the state of this eyeball to this Boolean variable head on. Now you get a nice little variable thing that you could disconnect. But I kind of wish there was some way of doing it other than just right-click on the eyeball. Anyway, so you can see right now it has been switched off just by connecting it. Because remember, this variable is actually switched off right now. Hey, we can actually preview this. Let's pull up our variable. I clicked on the background, click on the local variables. Look what happens if I turn this switch. Right? We can see it already. As I turn the Boolean on and off, the layer appears and disappears. But we don't have to do it manually. We've got some behavior here that's going to do it. So let me preview, Shift Spacebar. Look at that. Oh, it's so cool. When our mouse enters, the Boolean gets switched to true, it appears. When our mouse leaves, it gets switched off and it disappears. So I'm going to repeat it for the other two sections here. Hands, right-click on the eyeball, and then that's connected to hands. And feet is connected to right-click on the eyeball, feet on. Now we haven't set up the behaviors for that yet, so let's do that. We've got on the hands frame, prototype, interactions. We've got to set up the mouse enter and the mouse leave behavior. The mouse enters hands, the action, set a variable, which variable, hands on, and what value do we want it to be? True. When we hover over it, hands on is true. Add another interaction. On mouse leave, the action is set the variable hands on to false. Excellent. Now we just do feet. Same thing again. Interactions. Mouse enter. The variable is feet on. The value we want it to be is true. And then mouse leave. Set variable feet on to false. All right, was it that simple? Let's see. I'm going to click on the frame, Shift Spacebar, head, hands, feet. Awesome. So we've done it. Okay, we've got the hover action at a distance thing working. Let's move on to switching colors. All right, so let's add a little color changer. I won't make you watch me draw one. I've already prepared one here. Let's add it here. And imagine if you click on these squares, it's going to change the color of our dude here. Now it's very similar. We can attach the color of an object to a variable, just like we attached visibility to an object earlier. And we can add an interaction to these colored boxes such that when you click on one, it changes the value of that linked color variable. So let's walk through that. First, let's add a variable. Click on the page here to bring up my local variables. Click here. We're going to add a new one. And now we're going to use color. And you'll see that it's added it to our list of variables. But you know what? A color variable is kind of different than a Boolean switch variable. So what you can do is put it in a separate collection. I'm just going to delete this and go here. Under the three dots, I can ask for a new variable collection. And I'm just going to call this colors. Now we'll create a variable in our colors. Color. This variable will be the color of our little dude. I'm going to call it dude color. The default color, before we've done any interactivity, is just set to black. And I think that's all we need here. Let's connect this new variable, currently set to black, to our guy. I'm going to select him. He's actually a text character from the SF Pro font. And here's his fill color right here. Now this is so cool. You hover over these four dots here and you'll see apply styles and variables to my fill. Let's click on that. And look, there it is. It automatically shows up as one of your quick pick items under libraries. Dude color. Nothing changes, of course, because we set it to black. And now we have to do the other part, adding interactions that change the value of that variable based on which colored box we click on. We're becoming experts at this now. Let's look at our red frame. We'll go to prototype and add an interaction. We'll use click in this case. And what will happen? Well, we're going to set the value of a variable based on clicking on it. Now we can see our initial Boolean variables, but we also see our new color variable. This is the one we're targeting with this interaction. And what value do we want to give it? Well, I'm just going to steal the color from my little box here. I'll just do an eyedropper right on it, and we'll just use that. While we're here, I'll just do the blue one as well. Prototype, interaction. On click of the blue box, I want to set the variable. Dude color should be eyedropper blue. And finally, the black. Prototype, interaction. On click, set variable. Dude color, value is already set to black. Does that make sense? So we've got on each one of these boxes, set variable of color to red, set variable of color to blue, etc. Well, let's see if it works. Shift spacebar. Let's see what happens. Click on red. Yes. And click on blue. Blue. It's so cool. I love how this works. And we still have the other functionality still working as well. So we're getting closer. So the next step is figuring out how to make him switch from facing right to facing left by flipping a switch at the top. We're going to use variants to do that. Okay, for this next one, I've created a component for our little guy. And he's got two variants, a right variant and a left variant. I've also created a switch that's also a component that switches between these two states when you click on it, and we'll hook up some prototype behavior to switch the variant that's being shown. And just like the other examples, we're going to have a variable on our page that represents which variant is currently being shown of our guy. And the interaction with the switches will change the value of that variable to right or left depending which switch you flip. So the pattern is identical, just in this case, instead of holding a color or an on-off state, we're going to be holding a string value. And if that string value matches the exact name of the variant value, then we can connect the currently displayed variant to that string variable. Okay, that's a lot of words. Let's just do it and you'll see it. First thing we need, I'm going to click on our page so that I get the local variable switch. Click here. We're going to need a new variable. And again, I think I'll create a collection called variants. And let's create a variable here. Now there's no variable type called variant. We're able to use the string variable as our link. And as you can imagine, a string variable can be used for all sorts of other things as well. But for the scope of this demo, we're just going to focus on using it for variants. Well, let's call it direction. And what is the default value before we've done any interactions? Well, let's make it match our default position of right. The spelling's very important here. You don't get to pick your variants from a list. You've got to type it in. So make sure it's correct. All right, so we have a variable now that we could use already with the instance of our guy here. So let's do that. If I click on him and look up here where we would normally go to set which variant is visible, right or left, you'll also see this little icon here that lets us link it to a variable. And it's so cool, but there it is. Direction, the one we just built. It even says the default value is right. Let's click to that. So nothing's really changed, of course, because the default value matches the variant that was already there. But now we've got property one is direction, the variable. Next step, we add our switch. I'm just going to grab an instance of this switch, put it here. And this is a little bit different because we want the variance of the component to decide which value to put in the variable. Because there's just one object here. I can't assign two different behaviors to the same object, but I can assign two different behaviors to the different variants. So let's zoom in here. If the user clicks on a switch in this position, that will mean the switch is going to flip to the right and our guy will flip to the right. So the action associated with clicking on this switch, let's go to prototype. When the user clicks on it, the action will be to set a variable. Which variable? Direction. What will the value be if you click on this switch? It will be right. And we can just hit return and click away. Let's just check our work. Switches to the left and they click on it, that means we want the variant of the guy to be the right one. But we also want this switch to now be shown. So we have to add this little plus here because we're going to do two actions when the user clicks on this switch. We're going to do this variable change, but we are also going to change to right. And that's the normal variant changing behavior. A second action that's taking place, switching the displayed variant. And while we're at it, let's add Smart Animate just so it looks a little nicer. Okay, I'm going to do the opposite behavior now. If the user clicks on a switch in this position, we want the interaction to be, let's set the variable. Which variable? The direction variable. So what value do we want it to become? Left. Watch what happens if I just try to click away. It sort of goes, no, yeah, it didn't like it. It wants you to hit return here, which puts quotes around it, I think, just to make it an official entry. Now I can click away. So on click, set variable of direction to left. Now let's not forget to do our second interaction to change it to left. Now this is just talking about changing this switch instance from the right variant to the left variant. This is not related to the guy. This is just normal. When I click on the component, it changes the variant. So we should have switch behavior with some smart animate, and we should have the variable being changed as well. So let's try it. If I click here and shift spacebar, the switch should really be on the right when the guy is facing to the right as a starting position. So let me go over here, change the current variant into the design mode to right. So we're starting in the right position. Okay, that should work nice. We refresh. Okay, switch is on the right. He's facing to the right. I click on it. Oh, yes. So what's happening here again? I click on the switch. There's a little bit of animation as the switch moves back and forth, but more importantly, it changes the value of a variable on the page, which is a string, to either left or right, depending which variant of the switch I'm clicking on. And that string value is what's used by this component instance to decide which variant to show. So it's pretty cool. You've got a variable that both of these things are pointing to. The interaction part changes the value of it, and then the instance points at it as well. So there's no direct action taking place between any prototype interaction and these other layers. It's all done through variables. Okay, that's cool. And final piece is working with numbers. So you can start thinking about how to do a shopping basket, different values that you could use in your formulas. It opens up a whole world of possibilities. Let's do numbers now. All right, so the last and most interesting part, I think, of building prototypes with variables is doing math, like adding elements to a shopping cart, that sort of thing. How do we do calculations and work with numbers? So I've prepared some bits here. These have no powers at the moment. We're going to add them. These are just frames. One will be take away $5, add $5, and this will be the running total. Imagine that's how much money this guy has in his wallet or something, and we're giving him money. Here's how we're going to set this up. The variable that we're going to need is for the total, sort of the ongoing total. Let's create a variable for that. So I'll go to my local variables. I'm going to create a new collection for number variables like that. And then let's create our variable. And now we've done color, we've done string, we've done Boolean. Now we're doing number. This will be the total. The initial value is 0. That's all we need to set up here. We're done. Now we should be getting used to this pattern. We need to add an interaction to these buttons that affects this total. Let's start with adding $5. That's the easiest. So we'll go to prototype. What is the behavior that we're going to need? An interaction, on click, set variable. And the variable now is down at the bottom here, total. Now it's going to ask, what is the expression? Well, we need to add 5 to whatever the total is already. So you get to use the existing total as a value and then add. You can just type plus, but you can just click here too. Total plus what? So total plus 5. Total becomes total plus 5. All right, so I'd like to test this add $5 button, but the total isn't connected to any variable yet. So let's click on this box. I've got a $sign, which is one text box, and then a 0, which is just a placeholder at the moment. We want this text to actually be linked to a variable. So if you go right up to the top here on the properties, you'll see that link to variable icon, this one here, apply variable. Click on this. Oh, there it is, total. So I've connected it now to show me the number of the total. Well, it's 0 initially, so that's what it is. Let's try if this works already. I'm going to click on my frame, shift space. If I click on the 5, awesome. I can click, 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 click. Our number goes up, up, up. That's already super cool. Now let's do the -5. All right, so same thing again. Go to prototype, add an interaction. On click, what do? We set the variable, and the variable is total. What do we set it to? Well, we set it to, have to highlight total. I'm just going to type minus this time. -5. Total becomes total -5. All right, let's try that. Shift space, add 5s, subtract 5s. Awesome. So the only thing you'll potentially want to add is, oh, what about this situation? You can't have minus money. So we need to add some logic. How do we add the check? Only subtract 5 if the value is 5 or greater. Let's take a look. I'm going to close this preview window. Let's highlight the action that we attached to this button. And we had set variable as the action. Let's change this to conditional. Now your initial instinct might be to go to the formula here and look for a way to say if or add some conditional logic to the calculation. It doesn't work that way in Figma. If you want to do a conditional, you actually do it at this level. Where we would normally say set variable, we say, okay, there's a condition on what we're going to do here. So I clicked on condition, and you'll see this interface where it's saying, on click, if some test is true, do A, and if it's not true, do B. So when is it okay to subtract $5? Well, it's okay if the total, you see you get your comparisons here, is greater than or equal to 5. What happens when that's true? Well, then we set the variable. I have to go scroll to the bottom. Total minus 5. So we've set, let's read through this again quick here. Can I make this bigger? Yeah. On click, if total is greater than or equal to 5, set the total to total minus 5. That's all we need to say. You'll see a little icon here that sort of shows a choice. That could be it. Let's click on here, shift spacebar. If I click on minus 5 now, nothing happens. Add 5, 5, 5, 5, minus, 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 minus. Once I get to 0, it doesn't go any further. Oh, so we've not only added math, which is cool, we've added some conditional logic on when the math is applied. That was awesome. Okay, let's take a look at what we actually built. I'm going to click on the page background, design mode, and look at the variables we put together in this walkthrough. Now, I put these into collection groups as we were building them. You don't need to do that. They could all be in one list. I just like to group them out. So we've got a color variable that the color of the object is linked to. We've got a number variable where we're doing math and assigning values. Switches, which is our hovering effect when we hover on the heads, hands, and feet. And we have a string that we're using to decide which variant is going to be shown. Again, the prototyping behavior changes that too. So quite a bit in a pretty quick demo. Now there's a couple things that I found quite confusing when I first started using variables. At some point, you'll want to have a variable that is based on another variable, like say tax or some other calculation that's based on another value. What you'll find is you cannot create a variable whose calculation is just other variables as inputs. I found that a little odd, but this is just the way Figma is, at least today. If I create a number variable, there's no place to put a formula for this variable. It's just a place where values can be put by other actions. Unlike, say, Excel or any other scripting language where you can set up variables and create functions and formulas for it, it doesn't work that way. It's just a placeholder that you can store stuff. By the way, if I want to delete, I can right-click and hit delete variable here. So that was one thing that took some getting used to. The other thing I struggled with for a bit was sort of based on this last one. It's like, oh, what if this was a component where I had different variants that had different values, like I had different menu items with different prices? Could I create a component with a property called cost that instead of saying +5, I could say plus some property of the variant? Like imagine this was a component. I'm just going to quickly grab it, create a component, make a variant of this component, and say you wanted this to be a $5 and you wanted this to be a $10 item on a menu or something like that. It's like, okay, I can change the variant, I can change the label, but can I somehow add a property of this price component so that the math takes care of itself? Well, when you're trying to look for properties to add to a component, you can do variants, text, booleans, instance swaps, all cool things, but number is not one of them. And I even tried using text to hold a number and access it from my form. It doesn't work. So I don't know how to use variants to hold different numbers that can be used in calculations. It just doesn't seem to support that. So the way we did it here is kind of what you've got to work with. You have to set up specific hard-coded numbers to use in your calculations. I imagine someday Figma will add a bit more flexibility there, but for the moment, that's what you have to do. If that was a bit too obscure, don't worry about it. We've already covered the most important part, which is just how to add and subtract numbers from a total. Very, very cool feature that we were able to do just with prototypes and variables. And that is a quick run through of using variables in prototypes, the 4 main types: strings, numbers, booleans, and color. Good luck with these. I'm sure you'll find all sorts of uses for them, and we'll talk again soon.